So, explain your feels right now. Tell me your feels. Yeah, we are coherent writers. We are very intelligent people.
Giant octopus of happiness.
Yes. Okay. How are you feeling at this moment?
I'm feeling very excited. I don't should be able to hold the camera still.
Right. Well, I'm filming you filming, and you're filming me filming.
It's so meta.
Filmception.
Oh man.
We were at the second part of the author award ceremony, and we were about to see John Green. Good. Yes. He is right there. Yes.
Welcome to the Indiana Authors Award 2012 Authors presentation, the second half of it today, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guests. National Author Award winner, John Green. John Green is the number one our stars, Looking for Alaska, An Abundance of Catherines, and Paper Towns. His books have won many awards, including the Chicago Tribune Young Adult Fiction Prize, the Michael L. Prince Award, and the Edgar Award. And he has twice been a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize. Green is also one half of the Vlog Brothers on YouTube, an online video collaboration with his brother Hank that has been watched more than 230 million times and spawned a community of viewers committed to celebrating intellectualism and decreasing what they called world size. I'm sorry, I paused. I don't blame you. Wouldn't be able to get through that without giggling, but I failed, clearly, through philanthropic efforts and volunteer projects. Green lives in Indianapolis with his wife, Sarah, and son, Henry. Please join me in welcoming and congratulating John Green. I'm going to start with a very simple question. Why do you write? I'll start with John Green.
Oh man, I was hoping you were going to start with someone else. It's complicated. I think the main reason that I write is that I'm a lot happier when I'm writing than when I'm not writing, and that I don't think about it much harder than that. I just know that it's a big part of what makes me feel sane and okay. But I also really enjoy. It's a quiet and contemplative thing in a world that doesn't allow for a lot of quiet and contemplative things anymore. It's a place, you know, for me, like writing feels like a place. So when I say that it's a place, I mean that it's quasi-literally. It's a place where I'm able to be focused and attentive and not drawn in a million different directions and distracted by all the pretty flashing lights of the internet or whatever, and where I can just be, you know, for many hours at a time, sort of alive in the story, which also for me allows me, hopefully at least, to be a little bit more empathetic. I think, you know, writing is a way of imagining what it's like to be other people, and the better I do that, the better I'm also able to do it outside of my writing. So those are the reasons I write, I guess.
Basic question, who are some of the influences, literary or otherwise, that have shaped your writing?
Yeah, I am also deeply influenced by bad books. I worked as a book critic for many years and at a magazine that reviewed, you know, 400 books every 2 weeks, so I read a lot. And most of what I read was bad because I was young and I was sort of at the bottom end of the totem pole. I hope no one whose books I reviewed is here. But the great thing about a bad book is that it's like watching a puppeteer where you can see the strings, you know, and so you can see what they're doing in a way that you can't see what Vonnegut or you know, Toni Morrison is doing. So seeing the strings was very useful for me, and so reading a lot of sort of, for lack of a better word, bad books, was very useful. And I also find that I enjoy, without guilt and without irony, what are often called bad books. I like reading books where I know exactly what's going to happen. I like reading Edwardian romances. I like reading very sort of boilerplate, hard-boiled mysteries. I also like reading great mystery novels, and I love to read broadly. The writers who influenced me the most, I guess, are the writers who made me want to be a writer. Vonnegut was my favorite writer when I was a teenager, and I always thought very, very highly of him, both as a person, the way that he carried himself as a writer, but also his work. And then J.D. Salinger. I think anybody who writes about smart teens is writing with a consciousness of Salinger. I think Salinger is sort of our great, was in some ways the inventor of American adolescence as well as the chronicler of it. So yeah, I definitely think Salinger is a big influence on me. But I'm also influenced very profoundly by things that have nothing to do with writing or writers, by like stories that people tell me, or jokes that my wife makes or whatever. I'll steal from anybody. I think one of the things a writer has to have is an absolute fearlessness when it comes to theft. Obviously you can't plagiarize because then you get in trouble. I think that's the only reason that plagiarism is wrong. No, it's not. There are other reasons. I will and have, I stole from my grandmother all the time in ways that would anger her, but my responsibility is to the story. I'd never thought of it that way, but that's a very nice way of thinking about it. I like that a lot, the idea that it starts with a feeling or a desire to tell some story that you don't feel like is being told in the true way, or a way that's true to your experience. I do think my stories start with characters, but like you, I feel like it's connected. That there is no way of separating characters from ideas or characters from problems, just as there isn't in my life. Like I can't think about myself without thinking about the things that I'm interested in or the things that trouble me. I can't think about other people that way either. So for me, there's no separating character and theme, and really everything falls from that. It sort of spirals out from that. But that question of feeling, when I was starting to write The Fault in Our Stars way back in 2000, I was working at a children's hospital, and the kids I knew who had cancer or who were dealing with chronic illness in the hospital were so different from the kids I read about in cancer stories or the people who died in books like Little Women.
Such a pretty dance.
Exactly. Well, and that whole idea that we have in America that suffering is transcendent, and that suffering is good for you, and that it makes you better, and then if you're faced with the sort of the finality of death, then the story has to stop being about you, and it has to become about the well people who you are going to inspire, and all the healthy people who will learn important lessons from your death. And that's always, that's the case in most of those stories. And so I wanted to write a story that was much more about, that reflected my feelings about the people I've known and my sort of anger almost about that way of telling the story. Or with Looking for Alaska, I wanted to write a coming-of-age novel that was very autobiographical, and it was about my feelings and my own experiences of coming of age in Alabama in the 90s, instead of the stories that I was reading, which felt inauthentic to me and didn't feel adequately angry or So I wanted to do that. And in that process, I stole from a lot of people, and some of them who minded it, some of them who didn't. But I'm in the same position of many of the most quoted lines from my book, Looking for Alaska, are things that other people said to me. In fact, on our first date, my wife said to me, we went to the same high school, but we didn't know each other at all in high school. And I was talking about when I was in high school, how I used to imagine my adulthood, and I always kind of hoped that I would end up in a city like Chicago where we were living at the time, and not in Birmingham. And Sarah said, imagining the future is a kind of nostalgia. And I was like, whoa, and I wrote that down. Now all the time I see people quoting this, and they're quoting me, and I feel guilty. Sarah's line. And another line that gets quoted a lot is this line of the first thing my creative writing professor said to me. So we all sit down. There's like 14 of us, right? Like, first day of class, 8 in the morning. He sit down, 14 people. The first thing he says is that I should take off my hat. And then the first thing he says to the entire class is, listen, you may be smart, but I've been smart longer. And I was like, okay then. And I used that in Looking for Alaska, and I remember I emailed him and I said, do you mind if I use this? And he was like, you think I made that up?
It's a long line of things.
Exactly. We've been stealing.
Well, I think at this time, we'll throw the program over to you folks. What I would say is speak loudly. It's a big room and we don't have the mic.
Yes, why do you think that fiction is important? Not only reading it, you said empathy, but writing it. Like, why do you think we feel the desire to write things that aren't true and then sell them to people?
It's a very good question. Yeah, it's that great Faulkner line, I don't have to be, I'm not concerned with the facts, I'm concerned with the truth.
Yes.
The facts can sort of be limiting when it comes to trying to tell complex emotional truths or experiential truths, or, I mean, not to get sort of mystical, but there is we've been telling stories for a very long time. In fact, sort of one of the markers of civilization, that historians define civilization by is the moment where we stop telling each other stories and start writing them down. But long before so-called civilization, we were telling each other stories, and they were clearly, I mean, it's not right to I don't think it's quite right to say that they were made up, but they were clearly a kind of fiction. They were clearly a way of imagining the world through story. And I think we do that because, like you said, you get at truths that you can't get to with facts, because all of our personal factual experiences are limited in a way that our imagined experiences aren't. And so it gives us access to that the whole world of the imagination, instead of just the world of our own personal histories.
Yes, sir.
I recall when James at 15 premiered on NBC, and it was, I forget the year, but I believe it was in the late 1970s. 1977. You remember the year, 1977, thank you. And I remember then that I was growing up in Oklahoma, and there was considerable issue as to whether the network would actually show the program nationwide and whether the affiliate stations would carry it. Because at that time, the topic of the show was deemed so far outside what we would normally call family viewing. And the topic was bedwetting. They were worried about whether an Oklahoma audience would be able to put up with urine after the dinner hour. I'm wondering for each of you, what resistance have you all felt from your publishers, your editors, the distribution channel, your readers, when you put out the stories of us, in trying to convince these folks that they are about us and that they are the truth and that they should know more about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened to me a lot. It's happened to me hundreds of times, particularly being removed from school curricula and stuff like that. But it's never happened to me with my editor or my publisher or anyone there. I remember there's this very awkward, unerotic, aggressively unerotic, really, oral sex scene in Looking for Alaska, which has been the subject of a lot of controversy, even though no one has any fun. I remember when we were working on that scene, my editor and I work very closely together, and we talk about almost every word in the book because we're very close friends and we have a relationship outside of writing as well, and so we just spend a lot of time talking about this stuff. And I remember she was going through it and she wanted me to change like one euphemism for penis to a different euphemism for penis, but it was so the language would sound more clinical and contrast more with the next scene. It wasn't. It was for literary reasons, not for reasons of making censors happy, which clearly we didn't. My experience at least has been that my publisher, my editor, my sort of the community around my books has been supportive of whatever I want to write, and then we just sort of deal with it once it's out in the marketplace.
You realize you just told everyone Alaska was autobiographical, and
In the Fault in Our Stars, Hazel has a book called Imperial Legend, and it's her book. It's like, and I have one of those, and it's the Fault in Our Stars, but it's just, there's this thing, it's just this perfect book, and I call it my comfort book, and I keep it by my bed, so that it's just always there. And I was wondering if any of you have an Imperial Legend, and if so, how it affects you, like daily, because
That's a good question.
For those of you who couldn't hear that, it's whether there is a comfort book or a book that really shapes your life that you keep by your bedside all the time.
I've had a few over the years. I don't think I've had one the whole time, but when I was a high school student, I took Slaughterhouse-Five with me everywhere I went to try to, I'd like put it on a table at the coffee shop or whatever to try to attract the kind of people I wanted to be friends with. For years, it was Robert Penn Warren's novel, All the King's Men, which brought me great comfort when I was in college and in the years afterward. And then for years, it was The Great Gatsby, which I read. I still read every year, but I mean, back in those days, in my late 20s, right before Sarah and I started, we got married. That was a book that I looked to a lot, and I guess I'm a very late bloomer in the sense that now, if I had to think of one such book, it would be Catcher in the Rye, because my love for that book has changed so dramatically and grown so dramatically in the last few years.
When you start writing, do you physically sit down and write an outline, or do you just have one idea and you go?
Neither. I don't ever have that big idea, like wizard school. Waiting for it. J.K. Rowling keeps describing, like, I was on a train and the whole story came to me, and I was like, that must be nice. Like, I was flying in my private jet to America, and I wrote the last Harry Potter book, and I had this idea for a book. No, I have very small ideas, and so I write my very small ideas, and I try to connect them, and then they become a bigger idea. But I don't outline. There are as many ways to write a book as there are books, and so there's no right way. There are some wrong ways, but I don't think there's a right way. I don't think there's, I certainly don't advocate for my way of doing it, and I'm interested to hear the way these guys do it, because maybe I can switch. But the way I do it is I have these little ideas, I have these characters, I have this feeling, and I write a story that's like as long as a book, and then I send it. I ask my wife to read it, which she does reluctantly, and I ask my editor to read it, and then I delete either all of it or almost all of it. So maybe 5,000 words will survive from the 60,000 words that I wrote. And that process of writing a first draft is my outlining. That's me discovering the characters and figuring out what should happen and figuring out what shouldn't happen, and walking down all the wrong plot places that I need to walk down to get to the better ones. And so I spend 6 months or a year writing that draft, and then I delete all or most of it, and then I sort of work again with what I've discovered along the way, as sort of serving as signposts or guideposts to me as I write the second draft. And then that draft is the one that I can really work from.
Okay.
Hello, I'm Laurel, and yeah, we're very excited right now, so I'm probably not making sense. Yeah.
Okay, where are you from, and what's your favorite part of being a nerd fighter?
I am from Anderson, Indiana, and my favorite part of being a nerd fighter is that you can just be like crazy enthusiastic about everything, and no one cares. They're just like, great, good, yes.
My name is Pimp Socks. I'm from the middle of nowhere, and my favorite part about being a nerd fighter is how, especially on Tumblr, they're just kind of there, and then something happens and they're everywhere.
We are everywhere.
Totally amazing.
I'm Kaylee from Anderson,
And I guess my favorite part of being a nerd fighter is that you can be unashamedly excited about anything and everything, and it is perfectly okay.
I'm Delaney, and I'm from Anderson. And my favorite part about being a nerd fighter is pretty much what they just said. Like, I can be a nerd without being an outcast, and it's awesome.
Like, we're all the nerds in the middle of the room now.
Yeah.
Literally.
And you?
I'm just the taxi driver for the nerd fighters. She's the librarian for the nerd
Yeah,
fighters.
this is our librarian, and she's the greatest.
Amazing.
Cool.
Yeah.
And you are?
I'm Noah Lee. I'm from Indianapolis, and I love life
And
right
you're a
now.
nerd fighter too, I
Yes.
think. That's good to meet you,
Hence
Noah.
the shirt.
Okay, girls, what next?
2 jocks.